So today we're going to present climate change. My name is Maria Perez.
I'm Esther Perez.
I'm Loraine.
I'm Duran.
Okay, so first we're going to start off with the timeline of climate policy. Climate policy was first introduced in 1992 by the United Nations Framework Convention, Climate Change, and then it was later introduced the Kyoto Protocol in 1997. That's a treaty that among nations that sets limits on greenhouse gases emissions. In 2010, the Cancun Agreement was introduced, and later in 2015, the Paris Agreement was created. In 2016, they were scoping a meeting to draft out the outline for SR 1.5, and finally in 2018, they were able to approve the session. Okay, so the Kyoto Protocol is an agreement to the United States Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. It commits parties to setting international binding emissions, the reduction targets. It was adopted in December 1997 and finally activated on February 2005. Its objective is to reduce the harmful chemicals emitted to the atmosphere by creating a structure of rolling emission reduction period.
The Montreal Protocol is a global agreement to protect the ozone layer by phasing out the production and composition of ozone-depleting substances. It was finalized in 1987 and ratified in 1988. Next.
The Paris Agreement.
That's the Paris Agreement is to combat climate change and to accelerate and intensify actions and investments needed for a sustainable low-carbon future. It brings all the nations into a common cause to undertake ambitious efforts to combat climate change and adapt its effects, with enhanced support to assist developing countries to do so. Next.
Difficulties of global climate policy. Big climate policy will have to offer concrete benefit outside of the impact of the emissions, and many believe they will do more harm to the economy would come through inaction. Many people also question the set of price for emitting greenhouse gases. The United States Congress proposed on the Senate a cap and trade program. The price of emission will be market based, while the Europe trading system designed permits, but many believe that the permits can be oversold or used or overused. Next. Okay. When an LDC country wants to build an economic system, it turns to fossil fuels. They cannot afford alternatives without relying on fossil fuels. Developing countries believe that developed nations should be the ones to tackle the problems, allowing the developing nations to continue developing. For example, China and other developing countries are unlikely to accept any deal unless their total emissions can continue to grow. They prefer to move towards a system of equal per capita emissions, but this will be difficult to sell in the United States. The United Nations Convention on Climate Change stated that the convention recognizes that the poor countries have the right to economic development. In other words, the countries which have created the most greenhouse gases should take the lead in combating the problem. Next.
In 1990, Congress passed the Pollution Prevention Act, which states the Environmental Protection Agency must establish a source reduction program which collects and disseminates information. Also, it provides financial assistance to states and implements the other activities. Next. An Environmental Protection Agency policy could significantly minimize the role of independent science in determining acceptable levels of air pollution. The Clean Air Act requires the Environmental Protection Agency to create normal, national ambient air quality standards for harmful pollutants using the best available science.